So, have you noticed how quiet it's gotten recently?
Quiet, how do you mean?
I mean, coming out of Washington D.C., it's just this really strange, almost deafening silence.
Ah, right. On crypto. I see what you're getting at.
Exactly. Because for what, the better part of a decade, if you even glanced at the headlines, it was just a constant scream, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Crypto is a scam. Crypto is for criminals.
Right. We need to ban this entire dangerous experiment immediately.
And it wasn't just talk either. I mean, we saw these congressional hearings that felt more like, I don't know, ideological witch hunts. You had the SEC going after everyone with, regulation by enforcement, just dropping these huge lawsuits to try and throttle the whole industry.
The message was crystal clear. This technology is the enemy. Stay away.
And then, poof.
The switch just flipped, the noise stopped.
Yeah.
And suddenly, BlackRock, the ultimate establishment player, has an approved ETF. Suddenly you have politicians who are calling for bans showing up at Bitcoin conferences, smiling, shaking hands.
Talking about innovation.
Talking about innovation. The speed of that reversal is what you have to look at. It's too fast. It's too coordinated to be just a simple change of heart.
Well, exactly. You don't just reverse a decade of really entrenched hostile policy overnight because somebody finally, read the Bitcoin white paper.
Yeah.
It just doesn't happen.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Did they finally see the light? Did they get it? Or, and this is the cynical insight we're really diving into today, did they suddenly get terrified of a massive financial black hole opening up beneath them?
When you follow the money, the answer becomes pretty obvious.
And that's really our mission for this deep dive. We're investigating what we're calling the crypto reset. We're looking at that 180-degree turn that explains why the U.S. government is, kind of ironically, about to become the biggest promoter of digital dollars in history. You have to ignore the speeches and just follow the money.
Not the headlines.
And when you follow the money, you realize they are not adopting crypto to free you. They're adopting it to save themselves.
It all comes down to their colossal $35 trillion debt problem.
Let's frame that crisis first, because without the emergency, the pivot makes zero sense. The U.S. government has to borrow money every single day.
And not just for big new projects. This is just to function. To pay the bills, keep the lights on, and most critically, to pay the interest on the debt they already have.
But the old reliable buyers who used to fund all that, they're gone.
They're on strike.
So if your old buyers walk away, you are left scrambling. You need a replacement, a new massive source of capital that doesn't care about politics.
A buyer so big and so automatic that it could just absorb everything. You need a whale.
And they found their whale, hiding in plain sight in the one place they've been telling everyone to avoid.
Stablecoins. Specifically USDT and USDC. And that's the core truth, isn't it? The US Treasury is now strategically dependent on what they used to call magic internet money.
To really get the desperation that drove this whole pivot, you have to look at the numbers, the kind of numbers that must have just terrified officials at the Treasury.
Right. This is section 1. The debt doom loop and the buyer strike. This is the existential pressure cooker that forced their hand.
The scale of it is just, it's not abstract anymore. We're sitting at what, around $35 trillion in national debt?
And the speed we're adding to it is accelerating. Faster than any point in history outside of a world war. Yeah. But the debt itself is only half the story.
The truly scary number, the one that, keeps people up at night, is the interest payment.
The interest payment.
Right now, the U.S. is paying roughly $1.2 trillion every single year.
A year. Just to service the debt we already have.
Think about that. That's money that builds 0 roads, funds 0 schools. It does nothing. It's just the cost of maintaining the past.
And to give you some context on just how staggering that 1.2 trillion number is,
it
is now more than the U.S. spends annually on its entire military and defense budget.
Wow.
The irony is just profound. We are spending more on interest payments for PAF debt than on our own national security.
The cost of financing the past has officially eclipsed the cost of protecting the present.
And because of that, the Treasury is trapped. They are in a permanent state of emergency. They have to constantly sell massive amounts of new bonds, not for new projects, but just to raise cash to pay the interest.
It's a financial treadmill that's been cranked up to an all-out sprint.
And that sprint leads you right to the crisis of buyers. Historically, the whole system was propped up by a few huge, reliable customers.
We're talking about foreign nations, right? China, Japan.
Exactly. The countries that ran huge trade surpluses with the U.S. for decades and end up with mountains of dollars. China, Japan, the big oil states.
But the buyers haven't just slowed down. They have, for all intents and purposes, gone on strike.
And this isn't just a guess. You can see it in the data. It's a documented liquidation. Take China. Since 2021, they have dumped or let mature over $300 billion in U.S. Treasuries.
That is a strategic withdrawal of capital on a massive scale.
And it's not just China. Japan, who for decades was the single largest foreign holder of U.S. debt, they're selling too. Now, their reason is a bit different. They're selling dollars to buy yen, trying to prop up their own currency. But for the U.S. Treasury market, the effect is exactly the same. Huge, sustained selling pressure.
And there's no one obvious stepping in to fill that void.
Plus, you have to put this in the bigger geopolitical picture.
The de-dollarization trend.
The BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and all the new members, they're not just talking about it anymore. They are actively building alternative systems to settle trade outside the dollar. They are voting with their central bank balance sheets.
So you've got this collision course. The supply of U.S. debt is exploding because of the deficit.
And at the same time, the traditional demand from foreign buyers is collapsing. This creates what analysts call a liquidity air pocket.
That sounds bad. What does a liquidity air pocket actually mean for someone listening to this?
It means systemic risk. It means if there are no buyers when you're forced to sell, the price of your bonds craters. And when bond prices fall, the yield, the interest rate the government has to pay to attract a buyer spikes.
Uncontrollably.
Uncontrollably. And if those rates spike too fast, that $1.2 trillion interest payment suddenly becomes $1.5 trillion, then $2 trillion. At that point, the whole system breaks. It's an existential threat.
So the Treasury was backed into a corner. They needed a new buyer. And this buyer had to meet a very specific checklist, right?
3 boxes. 1, they need to have massive, and I mean massive and rapidly growing liquidity.
2, they need an unstoppable, almost algorithmic hunger for U.S. dollars.
And 3, they have to be completely indifferent to geopolitics. A buyer that operates like a machine that just must consume U.S. debt to survive.
They needed a whale, a new whale.
And they found one, in the very technology they spent a decade trying to kill.
And this is where the story shifts from, a dry financial crisis to just pure, delicious irony. We're in Section 2, the mechanism of the bailout, or as we're calling it, the stablecoin loophole. The U.S. government, the ultimate defender of centralized fiat, is now strategically dependent on magic internet money to keep the lights on.
The whole mechanism is, I have to say, a masterpiece of cynical opportunism. It's so elegant.
Let's break it down. We should start with the user's view, because that's what drives the whole thing.
Okay. So to a normal person, maybe a trader, or more importantly, someone living in a country with high inflation.
Argentina, Turkey, Nigeria.
Exactly. To them, a stablecoin like USDT or USDC is just a digital dollar. It's a quick and easy way to hold dollar value without needing a U.S. bank account.
But from the perspective of the U.S. Treasury, these tokens are something else entirely. They're a miracle, a machine that automatically generates demand for their debt.
Let's walk through it step by step. The whole thing rests on one foundational principle: collateralization.
Right, the one-to-one backing.
For every single dollar of a stablecoin that gets issued, the company behind it, Tether, Circle, whoever, is required to hold $1 worth of collateral. That's the promise. That maintains the peg.
So if they mint 1 billion new tokens,
they have to go acquire $1 billion in real assets to back it.
And what do these multi-billion-dollar companies do with all that cash? They can't just let it sit in a checking account earning nothing.
Of course not. They're a business. They need to generate yield to pay for their operations and to make a profit. So they look for the safest, most liquid, interest-bearing asset on the planet.
Which is?
Short-term U.S. Treasury bills, T-bills.
The perfect asset. It's super safe, which is what you need for collateral. It's liquid. And critically, it pays interest.
And there it is. The stablecoin issuer gets a business model, and the U.S. Treasury gets a captive buyer that is forced by its own business model to buy their product.
It's a symbiotic relationship born out of pure necessity.
And this isn't hypothetical. The impact is already staggering. Stablecoin issuers, as a group, already hold well over $150 billion in U.S. Treasuries.
Let's just pause on that number, $150 billion. Where does that rank them compared to, actual countries?
It's huge. That number immediately catapults the stablecoin market as a single entity into the top 20 holders of U.S. debt in the world.
Seriously?
They hold more U.S. Treasuries than Germany, More than South Korea. They're already creeping up on countries like France or Taiwan. This new whale isn't just on the radar, it's already a major player.
And it's growing faster than any of them.
Exponentially faster. But the really brilliant part, and the most effective part, is why this demand is so unstoppable, is what makes it sticky.
It's not like a central bank that can just decide to sell for political reasons.
Exactly. This demand is algorithmic, and to understand it, you have to look outside the U.S. This is the geofinancial loop.
Okay.
Think about a small business owner in Argentina, a family saving in Turkey, an entrepreneur in Nigeria.
All places where their local currency is just getting crushed by inflation.
Precisely. Their money is melting.
Yeah.
They're desperate for dollars to preserve their savings. But getting a real U.S. bank account can be incredibly difficult, or even impossible.
Right. Capital controls, bureaucracy.
But what can they do? They can go on a local exchange and buy USDT or USDC instantly, 247.
So the U.S. is effectively exporting its own currency stability as a product. The worse inflation gets elsewhere, the more attractive even a digital proxy for the dollar becomes.
And here's where the loop closes. When that person in Argentina buys $1,000 of stablecoin, they inject 1,000 real U.S. dollars into the issuer, like Circle. And because Circle has to maintain that one-to-one collateralization, they are algorithmically forced to take that $1,000 and go buy U.S. debt with it.
The transaction is complete. The developing world's demand for dollar stability gets funneled automatically into buying U.S. government debt. It is a brilliant self-serving system.
And it's totally immune to geopolitics. It's just a machine that feeds the Treasury. That's why some people are calling stablecoins Eurodollars 2.0.
Okay, but let me just play devil's advocate here for a second. This sounds like it creates a whole new kind of systemic risk, doesn't it?
How so?
Well, if the stability of the entire U.S. debt market is now becoming dependent on the good behavior and solvency of a few private companies like Tether and Circle, isn't that just trading one risk China selling for another, maybe even bigger concentration risk?
That is an excellent point, and it's one that regulators are absolutely thinking about. Yes, it replaces geopolitical risk with corporate concentration risk.
What if one of them has a catastrophic bank run?
It would be a disaster for the short-term Treasury market, no question. And that's exactly why the government's approach had to change. And that leads us right into the political pivot. The goal of regulation suddenly isn't to kill them. It's to control them. It's to mitigate that exact risk you just described and lock the whole system in place.
So once you understand that mechanism, that absolute existential need for this new source of demand, the whole political shift just clicks into place, doesn't it?
It all makes sense.
This brings us to Section 3, the political pivot, embracing the new whale. The entire calculation in Washington stopped being about ideology, the fear of crypto, and it just became about raw mathematical survival.
You can almost picture the moment in some meeting room at the Treasury. The realization must have been just chilling for the old guard. Wait a second, if we actually follow through and ban stablecoins, we're not just hurting the crypto industry.
We are killing one of our biggest, fastest growing, and most automatic buyers of our own debt.
And in doing so, we pour gasoline on the fire of our own debt crisis. They were on a path to commit financial self-sabotage.
So the mission it changed overnight. It went from, how do we kill this thing, to how do we capture it and turn it into a tool for our own survival?
And this whole pivot is being justified by some really high-level projections. You have Treasury insiders, people like Scott Bessent, who've done the math on this.
Okay.
The stablecoin market today is around, $200 billion?
Right.
But the key number, the one that is driving all this policy, is the prediction.
Which is?
That the market could grow to $2 trillion, maybe even $5 trillion, over the next decade.
That's the number, the $2 trillion prediction. That changes everything. That's the number that justifies the whole reversal.
It gives them a clear mathematical way out of that liquidity air pocket we talked about. Because if the stablecoin market hits $2 trillion...
That means $2 trillion of collateral has to be purchased, and almost all of it will be U.S. Treasuries.
That single injection of guaranteed capital effectively replaces everything that China and Japan have been selling, and then some.
This is the flippening that actually matters. Forget Bitcoin flipping gold. The real story is the stablecoin market flipping foreign central banks as the primary international buyer of U.S. debt.
It plugs the hole. Perfect.
And that brings us to the real goal of all this new legislation we're seeing in Congress to legitimize stablecoins and bring them onshore.
Right, because the public-facing rhetoric is always about consumer protection.
Or financial stability, combating illicit finance.
But if we stick to our framework, follow the money, not the headlines, The real goal is much simpler and much more cynical.
They're not regulating stablecoins to protect you, the consumer.
They are regulating them to make sure that the collateral, those hundreds of billions and soon trillions of dollars, stays permanently locked inside U.S. government debt.
Regulation is the lock-in mechanism. It's the legal framework that basically mandates that these issuers have to buy T-bills. It guarantees the demand.
What's really fascinating here is that they're effectively turning the private stablecoin industry into a kind of proxy, private Federal Reserve. They're outsourcing the critical government function of debt absorption to private companies, companies which are then algorithmically forced to buy the debt, fueled by all this global demand.
It's a genius workaround, actually. They get all the benefits of a central bank digital currency, a CBDC, without any of the political headache or the technical complexity.
Exactly. Why build your own politically toxic digital dollar from scratch when you can just deputize USDC and a regulated version of USDT to do the job for you?
It's faster, it's cheaper.
And it serves the exact same primary function, ensuring there's a massive guaranteed buyer for U.S. debt.
It's the ultimate exercise of financial power. They've captured the global demand for dollars on crypto rails and pointed it straight back at the Treasury.
Okay, so this strategic capture of stablecoins leads us to a really crucial distinction that everyone listening needs to understand. We have to separate the two different types of crypto that are emerging from this whole pivot.
Because when you hear a politician say, I'm crypto-friendly, you have to ask what they really mean.
And what they really mean is, I am friendly to the specific technology that helps me fund the $35 trillion debt. Right, so we need to categorize them. Let's call them the system, which is Gov Crypto, and the exit, which is good crypto.
Okay, let's start with the system. Gov Crypto, this is stablecoins.
These are Washington's new darlings. By their very nature, stablecoins are just digital fiat. They are pegged to the dollar, they are backed by dollar debt. They aren't an escape from the system.
They're the new high-tech foundation for the old debt cage.
And that's why they will be integrated and encouraged and regulated, because they serve the government's purpose. They are the new Eurodollar for the digital age.
And here's the critical warning for you, the listener. When you hold USDT or USDC, you are actively funding the machine designed to prop up the current debt system.
And you're still exposed to inflation, because they're pegged to the dollar, and the dollar has to be debased to manage the debt. They are a fantastic tool for liquidity, for moving money fast, but do not mistake them for a savings vehicle.
Okay, that's the system. Now let's talk about the exit, good crypto.
And here we are really talking about Bitcoin.
Because it's the only major asset that stands completely outside of this government debt loop we've been describing.
Completely. Bitcoin doesn't need U.S. debt to exist. It has no counterparty risk that depends on T-bills. Its supply is fixed and can't be changed by an act of Congress.
And that difference is everything in terms of how the government perceives it.
They love stablecoins because stablecoins are debt buyers. But they will always, always fear Bitcoin because it represents a real escape hatch, an off-ramp from their entire fiat system.
One supports their system, the other offers a mathematical alternative to it.
But here's the paradox. While the government fears Bitcoin, they can't really kill it without also destroying the very infrastructure that their new stablecoin strategy relies on.
Explain that.
Well, the government needs the 247 global crypto market. They need the blockchains, the exchanges, the fast settlement. They need that whole technological environment for their digital dollar strategy to work. They need the ship to sail smoothly.
And Bitcoin is on that ship.
And because that ship must sail, Bitcoin gets to survive as a kind of stowaway on the ship that stablecoins build.
That's a great way to put it. Their need to promote their own digital dollar inadvertently provides a shield for the asset designed to compete with it.
If they shut down the whole ecosystem to get at Bitcoin, they also shut down their new debt-buying whale. They're forced to tolerate the stowaway.
So the strategic takeaway here is pretty clear. Don't be fooled by crypto-friendly headlines from DC.
They're dollar-friendly.
They're dollar-friendly. They're promoting the part of crypto that preserves the dollar's dominance and helps them fund their liabilities.
So use stablecoins for what they're good for. Speed, liquidity, transfer. But if you're looking for a true safe haven, for savings that aren't tied to that $35 trillion problem, that has to be the hard asset they can't print.
So we've laid out the crisis, we've identified the new $2 trillion whale, and we've exposed the cynical politics behind this whole pivot. And it brings us back, in the end, to that perfect irony we started with.
That the technology created to make central banks obsolete
is now being used as the primary tool to save them, at least for a while.
It is the ultimate financial jujitsu move. They took the innovation designed to kill fiat and turned it into the most efficient global distribution system for fiat the world has ever seen. You have to admit, it's genius.
So the final question remains, will it work? Can this new whale strategy actually save the dollar in the long run?
And that's the final debate, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because you have to separate the short-term tactical victory from the long-term strategic reality.
Okay, so what's the argument for success?
The argument for success is really an argument for delay, a very significant delay. The stablecoin strategy provides massive, desperately needed liquidity to the Treasury market right now.
It plugs the hole that China and Japan left when they started selling.
Exactly. If that $2 trillion growth forecast is even close to accurate, that buys the U.S. decades of time. It makes the system stable enough to withstand that foreign selling pressure. The whale is real, and it is very, very hungry for debt.
It buys time.
And time is the most valuable commodity there is in politics. But the argument for ultimate failure is just as compelling because it's rooted in math. And you can't out-innovate bad math forever.
The debt is still $35 trillion, and it's growing by $1 trillion every 100 days or so.
Right. All this strategy does is create a new, more efficient way for the government to issue more debt. It doesn't reduce the debt load by a single dollar.
You're treating the symptom, the lack of buyers.
You're not treating the disease, which is the out-of-control spending. The whale can only swim as long as the ocean has water. Eventually, the debt load itself becomes the problem, no matter who is buying it.
So it's a bridge to a cliff, not a path to safety.
It could be. The final verdict is pretty clear. The U.S. government, out of pure desperation, has successfully weaponized the technology it feared to secure its immediate future. They found their whale, and they are feeding it.
But the structural problem, that massive compounding debt, is still there.
It's still there. Which leads us to the final provocative thought we want to leave you with to explore on your own.
Go ahead.
We've just spent this deep dive establishing how the government needs this incredibly complex, cynical global strategy just to keep their own currency system afloat. They need this to prop up the asset that they can print into infinity.
The question then becomes,
if the U.S. dollar requires this massive technological life support system just to keep the debt engine running, what does that imply about the ultimate immutable value of the one asset in this ecosystem they can't print?